Hey everybody, my withdrawal warriors. It's been a really long time and I apologize since I had started my part 1 of my withdrawal experience, and this is finally part 2. I also have to repent to God because of my slow obedience, and it has been weighing on my heart so heavily to get this message out there to those that need to hear it. Whether you're going through withdrawal, know somebody who's going through withdrawal, considering tapering or getting off of your medication, which of course you, if possible, can get some professional evaluation and advice on how to do that. I will upfront say that what, in my opinion, literally saved my life is survivingantidepressants.org. And that's where I learned the 10% of your current dose each time you decrease is the method that I went to get off of the medications. It still wasn't easy, and I'm sure I rushed it because of my impatience. So to pick up from part 1, this is where the troubles began when I was trying to get off of trazodone, because I was prescribed that due to the severe insomnia from the original medication, Saphris. The generic is asenapine. I will put those things in the description. So I had this really icky feeling going on in my body. It was like tiredness that I had never experienced before. It's like the energy was zapped out of me. There were points where I couldn't believe that I didn't just pass out. I didn't know a exhaustion like that could exist without, some sort of like passing out or ending up in the hospital or something like that. So every time I went down in my medication, I experienced insomnia all over again, and I noticed a cycle. So after going down about 25 milligrams, then I went down another 25 milligrams for a total of 50 from the original dose. So at this point, I'm at 250 milligrams of trazodone, and it got real. It was really, I said in the last video, traumatizing. After having gone through the first severe bout of insomnia, when it started happening again, that was triggering like a panicky feeling, this desperation, this, no, not again. I don't know if I can do this again. I don't know if I can go through this. So since this has been a few years, some of the details might be a bit fuzzy, but I believe I went back up just by a little bit. I did not have a scale to measure my pills at this point. So what I ended up doing, actually, I'll back up a little bit. I was cutting the pills. I had a pill cutter, and I would, depending like on the dosage, like I would cut the pill in half, and then I would cut it in a quarter and, add them up to the dosage I was on at the time. And the lower I was going, I noticed the harder it got. Like the symptoms were getting worse. It didn't take much for withdrawal symptoms to come back. The fatigue, the lack of appetite, the nausea, and the lack of sleep. And emotionally, I was falling apart at the seams for many reasons. I remember definitely the first one would be not having sleep, this painful experience, the exhaustion, not knowing when it was going to end was really, really mentally difficult to deal with. And I'm sure I'm going to touch a little bit on that later. So, when I got down to trying to break a pill into eighths, taking that quarter and cutting that in half, it would just crumble and fall apart. And so that wasn't working anymore for me. I started to figure out that I could file them down. I used a new clean nail file, and I would file it down. Without having a scale, I was taking a picture of my pills every night and eyeing it up. That's what I was left with. I've heard, why didn't you get a scale? Short answer is I didn't have any money. I didn't have access to the money. So hopefully I'll get to that at some other video. So that was an inaccurate way to do it, and it probably led to the symptoms waxing and waning, and it wasn't a smooth transition. So at some point I was at my mom's house, and I showed her what I would do every night, and she actually started crying and said, I can't believe you have to do this. I, by the way, even had that idea because I saw in a documentary, which I really hope I can find and post the link in the description, of a man who was using a straight razor to chip away or kind of shave off pieces of his pills, and then he was weighing it on a scale. And that was early in my withdrawal experience, and I thought that was insane. He's just being dramatic. I had no idea. That is what it comes to for a lot of us, and that became my experience. And I don't think anybody could really believe it or wrap their head around it unless they're experiencing it themselves. So what would happen, I got into this pattern where when I was ready to decrease, again, I was going a little faster than I know I should have. I was impatient. It was about every 3 days I would take off a little bit, probably like a noticeable amount when I was eyeing it up. And it would go into the cycle of 1 to 3 days at least of the insomnia coming back. And by like the second day, I was pretty distraught, kind of coming unglued. By the third day, I was just a mess. My logic, if anybody's wondering why in the world I was doing all of this, was the hope and the gamble, 100% a gamble, that I would endure a little bit more pain for a shorter amount of time instead of spreading the pain out longer. Everybody's different, and that was most definitely a risk, and that was something I imposed upon myself. So again, all of this is up to you if this is what you're going through. That was my logic. That was my plan. And it took just over a year to completely get off of everything. If you don't include that month I was on the trazodone to try to get my bearings and get some sleep and feel a little bit sane for a few weeks. So that was extremely hard. I lost, I can't remember exactly, something between 15 and 20 pounds off of a already small frame because I could barely eat anything, and I felt sick to my stomach more often than not. And I cannot say enough, the exhaustion, the utter exhaustion I'm grateful that I wasn't working at the time, because I highly doubt I would have been able to hold a job. I'm pretty sure I would have to quit. And I've heard that before. People having to leave their job or getting fired because they couldn't perform, or full-on careers that had to end because of this. And my heart really goes out to people like that, especially when you're trying to support a family and that's your livelihood. So after my mom saw what I was doing, she got a scale for me. And that's where I was able to measure out the pills. I am going to make a video and demonstrate how I did that. I was able to measure the pills and calculate each dosage I was on at that point, what minus 10% of that was, and what that converted into in terms of weight. That didn't make it necessarily easier, but a more consistent and smoother transition downward on my dosage. I think at some point I had somewhat stabilized my sleep, and I got to a particular dosage where I couldn't sleep again. It's not a linear healing at all, as you may hear. So, kind of going with the Saphris, no sleep, getting on trazodone and sleeping for about half the week. Then there was increasing the trazodone, and I was sleeping for a month. And then I decreased it, not sleeping very well or again for a while. And then that slower transition, it stabilized somewhat. My sleep patterns were still disturbed, but it was tolerable. Usually the issue was getting to sleep, and then once I was asleep, I could stay asleep. So there were, I remember consistently, I probably wouldn't be asleep until about 2 a.m, and then I would have to get up a few hours later, but it was sleep. So whatever dosage I was on at the time, which I can't remember, it kicked back in again, and I freaked out, like mentally. And I was talking to my like counselor / nurse, and I was telling her what was going on, and I was like, here we go again. I just thought, I don't know if I can do this again. What am I going to do? What am I going to do? That's what it was. Like, it wasn't like a panic where my heart was beating, but I was freaking out in my mind. I was just freaking out. Like, I don't know. So I just, from what I remember, just dealt with it. Terrible sleep for another several months. And my last dose was the size of a breadcrumb. I think it was 0.02 grams, roundabout. And my sleep took a couple of years to recover. I forgot to mention that throughout this whole process, I made a list, at least 15 different things. Anywhere from Benadryl, by the way, Unisom is the same thing. So the over-the-counter sleeping medication, there were like sleep drinks that had things like melatonin and L-theanine in it. So yeah, there's the Benadryl, the melatonin, the sleep concoctions. I got a homeopathic practitioner to make a tincture for me. It's a long list, and nothing really worked. Nothing could touch this insomnia. It's like my brain forgot how to sleep. I would oftentimes feel myself starting to drift off. Feel so good when I know I'm about to fall asleep, and then something would snap in my brain and I would just come out of it. It's like I wouldn't actually sleep on those nights that I couldn't sleep, or it took a very long time. there's been so many symptoms that some cannot or could not tolerate. I've cried reading these stories. People have themselves. Akathisia sounds like one of the worst, where you just have this feeling that you need to move, and people are moving and pacing and squirming, and so I consider myself one of the lucky ones. I went through a lot. I'm sure, I mean, I don't know what it would be like if it was any different, but I probably put myself through a little bit more than I needed to. Who knows? But it happened the way it happened, and I would say even needed to happen, because here I am, called to share my story, so there can be some minimization of harm, and that people don't have to go through this ignorantly, whether it's walking into this pharmaceutical journey or coming out of it. I really hope this helped. I'm sure I will be sharing more details as they come to mind. And again, those are the physical symptoms, and the mental part of it, the emotional part of it, I would love to dig much deeper into, because that was just as bad, and it all compounded. I really appreciate you listening, and I'm going to be praying for all of you withdrawal warriors out there. Thanks again.